Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hey, and a warm welcome to Sarah Delaney. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm awesome, Ange. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Excited to have you on. Honestly, it's been a while. I want to say almost 20 podcasts since I've had a Scotian on the podcast with me. So super excited.
Nice.
Yeah. Everyone, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Sarah Delaney. She is the CEO of BFD Retail Business Consulting. So just a little bit about her, and Sarah, feel free to jump in and add any adage that you see fit. So Sarah is a retail operations specialist, and she has more than 25 years in the proverbial trenches. She's not afraid to roll up her sleeves, that's for sure. She's done it all from cashier to merchant to district manager, and she has the ability or superpower to find operational efficiencies in a single bound. And she really enjoys managing change and helping people grow into their own potential. She loves scheduling, crossword puzzles, singing badly, and late 80s club hits. She also feels quite strongly about the Oxford comma, but maybe we'll save the latter part for another time or another discussion. So again, Sarah, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your business so that we can understand exactly what you do for the retail industry.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for the warm welcome. And yeah, nobody needs a grammar lesson this early in the day. So what we do is a lot of times people get into opening a store or retail outlet because they're really passionate about their product. Mm-hmm. They really love candles or making whatever. Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily realize all of the aspects of running a business, because I really don't believe that any entrepreneur knows all of the ins and outs of a business until they're buried in it. So what we do is we try and build some processes around the operational side of things to give people some solid footing so that then they can grow forward. The other thing that we help people with is just giving them confidence and making them realize that they're not alone. The thing about retail, entrepreneurship is lonely. Retail is almost lonelier because it does get a bad rap as just, it's a minimum wage job and it's not a career, but it really can be. And being able to make sure that people are feeling confident and looking for the help and getting the help that they need without, struggling any more than they need to. Because retail is not rocket science. It is a big deal, but it's not rocket science.
Definitely enjoying those insights. And so you've seen and you've identified, why the nuance is that it's a social norm, that it's the quote unquote dead end job. And in actuality, it's not. It could actually be not just a career, but also a passion outside of ownership. So when you're thinking about this from a leadership lens, because you've been there, tell us a little bit about some more of those nuances in retail.
Well, when you're coming up inside, if you're starting in a smaller store, it might seem that there's not necessarily opportunity to grow. But there really is, because you can take on all kinds of roles and responsibilities that you wouldn't normally get exposed to if you were in a bigger company. If you're starting in a bigger company, there are a lot more formalized opportunities for growth and development. A lot of times what you really need in terms of growth into a leadership role is desire. But you really have to have some grit. And realistically speaking, the two things that, other than that, are the most, other than your stick-to-itiveness, your grit, resilience, and agility. right?
Mm.
Being able to have a nimble mindset and be able to change because, retailers change if it's nothing else.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And so help us understand, because when we think about the words resiliency, adaptability, and grit, they're quite the buzzwords these days, right?
True.
So again, thinking about it from a retail lens, what do those things translate to in the sense of actions and mindsets?
So the nice thing about retail, so a lot of people can relate to an office job. They're an accountant. They have very specific things and tasks that they have to do every day. They get a new customer or a new client. Um, they react to them and they respond to them in a very specific way, and it doesn't change very much, right? The customer's inputs might be different, but the outcome is always the same. With a retail store, what you're doing is you're creating an experience, a customer experience, and every customer is going to experience that situation differently because of what they bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So when those customers are coming into your store, you set it up according to the psychology. You build your display, you build your product lines based on what you know sells in your marketplace on the financial and data driven side of things. But you're front line and you are interacting with people. You're inviting random strangers and guests into your business every single day if you're a brick and mortar, if you're online as well.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever they bring to that meeting is where you have to meet them. So sometimes they've had a really crummy day. Sometimes they're not well. Sometimes they're very angry. Sometimes they're having a fantastic day and you couldn't do anything wrong. So you have to be adaptable and agile enough to be able to take what you're handed, figure out what that customer is looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can fill that need.
Mm-hmm.
In the best way. The resilience part of it comes with the fact that sometimes those customers do come in not in the best frame of mind,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't act as their best selves.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can really, take the air out of your balloon. And it's about being able to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and meet that next challenge. And be there for your team. So if you're a retail leader, you don't really get to have a bad day because you have people who are counting on you to be the one who sets the tone for how those customers are greeted, how those customers feel when they leave. And you're also there to drive sales, to teach, to mold and develop your next level of leaders who ideally are going to come up and take your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And cycling back a little bit, what I was hearing was when it comes to skill sets of team members within the workplace, leaders have an opportunity to influence more so around empathy, right? So being able to meet people where they're at is one thing that you had described, and having the kind of grit to pick themselves back up and keep going, or resiliency. I should say, but all this to say, to me, in some circumstances, it might be being able to not sympathize, because, there are boundaries with regards to behaviors, especially in the marketplace or in retail. But to me, it kind of lands on empathy and really how to train your staff or your team members to ensure that that is kind of the forefront of their mind. Because that can be the key to unlocking, deflating conversations and ensuring that you have return customers and stuff like that, eh?
Yep, definitely. The I hate the phrase soft skills because skills are skills.
Mm-hmm.
But you can teach pretty much anybody how to build a display. Um, you know, uh, some people are better interior decorators than others, so some people are going to be better at building displays than others in terms of merchandising. You can teach people how to make an appropriate label or sign or something like that. It's a little bit harder to teach them to put other people's needs ahead of their own.
Mm.
And that's, realistically speaking, that's what we're doing in a service industry. Is when you put yourself in front of that customer, you're trying to fill their needs by putting your own personal needs, your emotional needs, and physical sometimes, to the side for a short period of time. That's not to say that the other person's gets carte blanche or free reign rather, to be inappropriate.
Mm,
We have seen a lot more of that since the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic.
mhm,
And as things open back up, retail employees have really faced some serious challenges, and retail leaders in particular, as you're not able to fill those entry level roles, you find yourself backfilling, and it's hard to keep people on that straight and narrow and uplifted. Um, but yeah, you're trying to teach people to view something from someone else's perspective, and some people
mhm.
come by that naturally. Um, Anybody who's read the Four Tendencies with Gretchen Rubin, there's a lot of people pleasers out there,
Mhm.
but then there's a lot of people who that doesn't come naturally to, and you really need to teach them um, how to see signs, and to look for flags and
Mhm.
indicators for how you can connect with that person.
Mhm. Mm. That makes total sense to me, Sarah. And when you're thinking about it in the leadership capacity, there was a lot to unpack there. What I'm hearing is things like because of environmental things that are going on, fires, floods, COVID, et cetera, it's making it harder and harder to retain or engage your current team members. And so
Definitely.
when you're thinking about that from a leadership role, especially in retail, how can leaders set themselves apart to ensure that they're putting their best foot forward in these types of areas to retain their team members?
I think that the best way to do that is to display empathy yourself,
Mm,
to think about what's going on in your team members' lives,
mhm,
because we've all got a list 6 miles long of things that have to get done today, tasks, goals, objectives. Um, you really want to sell 600 of whatever widget it happens to be. You're worried about making payroll. You're worried about paying your rent or your mortgage. You're worried about vendors that need to be looked after. You're worried about that flyer that or advertising campaign that you've got set up for next month. Um, but your employees and your team members are coming every day, and they're bringing their own lives and their own issues,
mhm,
right? And so um, the fires that we just experienced here in Nova Scotia were a prime example of that. I work with several retailers who they were directly affected. They were just outside the affected zone. They had an associate whose home burned down
mhm,
on the first day,
mhm,
and they continued to come to work. And they that client, they looked at their employee, and they were like, well, you don't have to be here. If you need time, like, take the time. And there's like, I really need something to do and something else to focus on. I need someone else's problems to focus on so that I don't have to think about my own. So
mm,
that client was showing empathy, looking after the associate, and then the associate really wanted something else to focus on beyond their own issues. So
mm,
it's that cycle. Um, but I think that when you look at your team members, not just as an asset, because I find there's there's a big difference between a manager and a leader.
mhm,
Um, we have a lot of retail managers, as we do in any industry. They are people who manage tasks. They think that they're managing people, but really they're just managing schedules. And they're really focused on the outcome, but not necessarily the input.
mhm,
Leaders step forward, um, and they step forward where other people are scared to step in. Leaders are someone who gets out in front when there's a challenge, and they give people a reason um, to engage and something else to focus on. I find that if you go into a store, any store, and you walk in, you can tell if they have a leader or a manager when you walk in by the attitude and the feeling that you get from their team,
mhm,
right? If the employees are happy and they are relaxed, they're still doing their work. I'm not talking about the ones who are just lazy and playing on their
mm,
phone, but people who are actually engaged and really seem to enjoy what it is that they're doing. it's probably because they've got a strong leader who actually cares about their engagement and whether they want to be there or not. Sometimes the best thing that you can do as a leader for the rest of your team is to give the people who don't want to be there an opportunity to find their place somewhere else.
Absolutely. And it really comes down to positive fit, meaning that it's not just a fit for the team member, the employee, but it's a fit with the management team, with their peers, and with the organization. I think that's a really fair statement, and a positive way to look at, what is an opportunity for someone to exit or the way in which someone should exit an organization if they aren't a fit. You use the word opportunity instead of termination, which I really appreciate, because sometimes those are sticky conversations. And when you have strong leadership in play, they don't have to be. They can just be career finding communication or conversations, right? Where it becomes a win-win.
Something that I find a lot of people make the mistake that just because a conversation is difficult or complicated or uncomfortable, they find that it's a conflict, and it's not necessarily conflict. We have such a negative connotation around the word conflict, and all it means is that, you anticipate, a lot of times people are anticipating how the other person's going to respond without actually giving them the opportunity or, giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to be receptive or open. I find that as a people leader, if you are transparent in your satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and I'm not saying that you walk around like a storm cloud because you're frustrated. What I mean by that is you're clear in your expectations. You're clear when you communicate those expectations to your associate, and you are responsive. An old leader that I had that I valued very much left it with me that he keeps very short accounts. And what that meant was that you got immediate feedback. Good, bad, ugly. Don't wait. We're all guilty at some point. Anybody who's led people are all guilty at some point of putting off. Oh, it's really uncomfortable, or I'm really busy. I don't really have time to go and sit with Frank and let him know what a great job he did, or that he probably could have handled that a little bit better. That conversation is going to be sticky. I'm going to wait. And then something else comes up, and then it's 2 days later, and it's too late, right? Because then it comes across as disciplinary as opposed to coaching, right?
Absolutely.
Or consultative. And those conversations. So if you can keep short accounts, and you're immediate with your feedback, both positive and constructive, people know exactly what to expect. They always know where they stand, and nobody has to be worried about conflict. So even if you are giving somebody an opportunity to find a better fit, it's not a surprise and nobody's upset.
Absolutely. I really agree with all of those statements. And what was coming up for me, and I don't know if I have a personal bias because it's been decades since I've worked in retail myself, but have worked with leaders in retail. I guess I'm more wondering and curious, is there still the stigma or the trend in leadership that they're going to be with us a short time, not a long time, so therefore I do not really need to invest? Meaning that they're still leading, but they're not investing in the sense of the skills that could otherwise really turn the page proverbially for those individuals and the team on itself.
Those retailers are why I have a company, because that's a terrible way to approach any
Absolutely
industry.
Agree. Yes.
So another story that I really focus on. Somebody said, well, my goodness, we keep hiring these people. It costs us $5,000 to bring somebody on, get them trained, and then they quit. And they're like, we spend all this money and they leave. And somebody said, okay, but what if you don't spend that money and they stay? So you are much better off to invest. I don't want to work someplace or for someone who is not invested in my success. I don't want to have somebody on my team who isn't interested in me investing in their success. So, yes, you might be there for a short term or, a part-time job, But when you're there, I want you to be as happy and content in that role as you can be. I want you to have all of the knowledge and the skills that you require in order to be successful in that role.
Right.
And it's to everyone's advantage because you're happier and more content, so you stay. My turnover is lower. When you're happy and content, you do a better job. So my tasking is done more quickly. My customers are happier. When they come in, they can tell that you're content here and they want to shop in the store. So I think that the owners, the retailers, the managers who can identify the difference between managing and leading, they're the ones who are the most successful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you're not that person, hire to your weakness. Hire yourself a store manager who is really good at that so that you can focus on the stuff that you are good at.
I tend to agree. And I think what I was kind of imagining as you were speaking, Sarah, is things like, to put it in tactics, if you have an individual and they're in high school, let's just say, it's quite easy to have a conversation to be like, hey, what skills do you want to get from us over the next 3 months, 6 months, what have you, or this summer? That is a telltale conversation to identify, are they going to stay with you past high school? Maybe they're going to work with you and go to university at the same time, who knows? But having those quick hit conversations shows that you're validating your team members as well as honestly interested in them. And it gives you an opportunity to create longer term plans. So as you look around your retail operation, you can see who wants to be there longer term and who wants to be there shorter term. Not that that gives you an opportunity to treat people differently, but you're giving skill sets and mentorship in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't even need to be as formal as asking somebody what they want to learn. Ask them what their life goals are. Have a conversation with them and see what interests them.
Yeah, that's
when
fair.
you work next to somebody, you see what their strengths are. You can figure out better than they can how that's going to translate in your own business because you know the skills that make somebody good at one thing or something else. I was very fortunate. I had a really great mentor in my store manager. Now, I had focus, I had desire. I had no desire to make a career in retail. I had managed amusement parks before I went into this. And that was what I was doing. I'd gone back to university for a second degree so that I could get a work visa to go into the States and manage amusement parks full time. So I had no desire to make a career in retail, but the skills were adaptable. And I had a manager who was interested in me and my development. So even though he had me doing managerial roles and tasks when I was just, a minimum wage floor associate, because I had those skills and he wanted to watch me develop them. He gave me that opportunity and he pushed me into things that I didn't think that I was ready for because he took the time to get to know me and to know that, I would find it interesting. And, here I am almost 30 years later, fully entrenched in an industry that, for the most part, I didn't even know existed for the longest time. Right. And yes, you'll hear quite often nobody gets rich in retail. Well, they don't if, their motivation or their focus is strictly tasking. But if you care about outcomes and you care about the outcomes of your people, the sky's the limit. And those skills are adaptable and transferable from any industry.
And so you said something really interesting. It's not just about tasks. It's about investing or being enriched or enriching your team members, I should say, or employees. And so with that in mind, Sarah, tell us more about, from a retail perspective, where do you see the intersect between operations and leadership? And how do you ensure that you're giving kind of equal efforts in both areas, right? Because oftentimes what we see is, regardless of demographic or what industry people are in, operations 9 times out of 10 will supersede leadership. when called to task, right? And the fact of the matter is, when you think about true leadership, it's something that should be intertwined and lived and breathed, right? Not just
100%.
words on a proverbial wall. So tell me about your experiences in that arena, and what do you offer your clients from the operational side of things so that they're not forgetting about that whole leadership piece?
That is such a big question, but also a really small one. I think what happens for the most part is people get very focused on the tasks because those are the things that are on fire. And they forget that they need to invest in those emotional bank accounts by actually caring about people. They put those relationships aside. Oh, I'll get to that. I'll spend time with Marvin on Tuesday. Today, I have to worry about getting this order placed. Instead, what they could do is spend time with Marvin, teaching him how to place that order, which looks like it's a task, but it's actually a relationship development, right? Whether that becomes his job down the road or he gets good at it or doesn't get good at it, it's not relevant. What's relevant is taking the time to spend even on tasks that you don't like together. So one of the things that we do, I find that a lot of independent retailers, they get buried in the tasks. They run from thing to thing, and because they're not organized and they don't have processes in place, they can't think about developing people because they are so overwhelmed and overrun that it becomes incidental. So unless it's something that you're naturally good at, developing those relationships, it's not something that happens. Or you'll find people who are really great at the relationship stuff and they let all of the process and the back end stuff just fall to pieces. And then they end up closing their business, and it's very, very sad. And their customers and their teams are super sad because they really loved going and hanging out there, but they weren't very good at the business part. So one of the things that we do is we help them try and find that balance. We put the processes in place so that there are systems, so that you can simplify it, so that you're not always running around going from one problem to the next, or only dealing with the thing that's currently on fire. You're able to actually plan and schedule time for yourself so that way you can think about things from a strategic perspective in terms of how you're going to develop your team, how you're going to grow forward, how you're going to present people with opportunities. And by presenting your team with opportunities and helping them grow, it actually allows you more flexibility to spend time doing the things that you like. Right. And, for some of us, what I like is the people part. So I really like being able to help coach people who may not necessarily understand the nuance of their language when they're having a conversation with an associate, or understand the fact that simply because you're the boss, whatever you say comes out with so much more gravitas than you might intend it. You might make a casual comment that you just think is a throwaway, and that's something that your employee or your team member is going to take home, take to heart, and then lose sleep over. So it's really important that you have the brain space to be able to think of those things and make sure that you're anticipating those needs in your team. I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
it absolutely did. And what I'm hearing, Sarah, is that, with BFD retail consulting, it's really about taking the nuances out of the task and quieting those proverbial storms or fires, so that they can step into leadership from a proverbial managerial seats, whether they're owners or not, so that they can focus on the people. And that way they don't have to spend, going back to your previous example, on average $5,000 each time they have to rehire someone, which we know is a lot more. It's 2 times to 3 times the actual salary per employee, right? So it's very important to ensure that there's the right processes and SOPs, I should say, in place, or systems. And then on top of that, what I'm hearing is you also have the ability to customize it. so that you're really listening to those leaders of the retail organizations, and you can make suggestive comments and influence a positive impact for their team, because ultimately that's what we all want, for sure. I think at the end of the day, for the most part, when we're looking at, our owners and leaders and even managers, they don't wake up and get out of bed and think that they want to be a jerk to their team members.
100%.
Oftentimes it could be a blind spot, it could be a learning opportunity, or they just don't know how to deploy something.
Very much. I run into that a lot with people who just they know what they want, they know how to get there, they know what that person needs, they just don't know how to necessarily deliver that message. Sometimes though, it's about self-leadership and figuring out, because what you just said is about that self-awareness. Yes. Of knowing that they're not necessarily good at that thing. It is very difficult. It's easy to spot it in other people, but it is really difficult to see things in yourself and then work to those gaps. Right. And a lot of people really struggle with that. And a lot of people don't actually take the time until someone points it out to focus on those things. So sometimes it's about just teaching those leaders how to lead themselves through those conversations.
Definitely. And Sarah, what would you say is your big focus right now? Or is there any one area that you're really helping retailers out with?
Oh, jeepers. Everybody is so different in their business. It's funny because, again, like you think that it should be easy and standardized, but I think one of the biggest things that people are struggling with right now, and I mean, you hear about it all the time, that it's very difficult to hire and keep staff, that the retention is a challenge. Retention doesn't need to be a challenge if your onboarding is strong, because a lot of people don't actually develop an onboarding program where they have a checklist. It makes a huge difference in terms of making sure that you've told people where to eat lunch, that that they understand how to record their hours. Something really simple, like that, how they're going to find their paycheck every week. Those things we forget because for us, they're second nature. So these things are done ad hoc instead of in a systematic way. That's complicated for a new associate who's coming on board. They are taking on a new job. They want to learn their new skills. They want to meet their new team members. They're nervous, and then they ask one question and to get some information, and they ask another question, and they stop asking questions after a while because they feel like they're being a pain, or that you're going to think that they're not learning quickly enough. Or so having a strong onboarding process makes a huge deal of difference in terms of how your team feels about their experience and if they want to stay. And then you can take the time to focus on the things that are far more fun for them. So I think right now, one of the big things that I'm seeing as a theme across all industries, because we go from fabric shops to liquor outlets to bicycle stores to you name it, we help. And that retention, that hiring and retention, and there's an awful lot of time that goes into recruiting. And people are complaining that people who apply for jobs, they're ghosting them or whatever. And the easiest way to combat that is to make sure that the team that you have is happy. And the easiest way to make sure that your team is happy is to give them a great work experience. So paying attention to them, and it doesn't have to cost you a lot in order to be able to offer benefits. A benefit to an associate that they put more value on than you ever will is flexibility in their scheduling. Or being organized enough to make sure that their schedule is posted 2 weeks in advance so that they can actually plan their lives. That doesn't seem like it's a huge commitment. For some people, when they're in the weeds, that is a big time commitment, but it has such a strong impact on their team. So I would say that that's the biggest consistency. Other than that, man, it's all over the board. Sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's ordering, sometimes it's logistics. Sometimes it's something as simple as finding somebody to clean the bathrooms on a consistent basis. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
What keeps you when you wake up in the morning and plant your feet on the floor, what keeps you wanting to help out the retail industry? You mentioned earlier about the passion.
Yeah. I love to see people happy in something that they enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell when I walk into a store if their owner is sleeping at night. I can tell when I walk into a store if they're absentee or checked out. I can tell when I walk in if they are, they have every finger in every hole and they're just holding on by a thread. Or I can tell if they are like happy as pigs in mud and just at ease in themselves and in their business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to see people struggle.
Mm-hmm.
If there is something that I have in my bag of tricks or my skill set that I can offer to somebody that is going to make their life easier or better or take away an obstacle, that's something that I want to do. And retail is not rocket science. It's psychology. It's not rocket science, but I like to give them the rocket fuel that's going to project them to the next level. Mm-hmm. Right. And I give you some tips or some skills. They're going to help you be able to better manage a process or better manage your team or better manage your time. Mm-hmm. Because it's the one thing that we really do try and give back to the owners and business leaders is time, because it's the one thing that they can't create for themselves.
Yes, I agree with that as well. If only we could all get more time, right?
Exactly.
There's a way. There's a way. Yeah. Then you can have afternoon naps for sure. Yep. So Sarah, I know that we could definitely talk about this at length, but want to respect your time here. Help us understand, where can we find you? On LinkedIn or direct?
Easiest way is through our website. It's BFD, because we're a big friggin' deal, consulting.ca. And so that's the easiest way. There's a connect button right on there. We are on LinkedIn and Facebook, completely transparent. As much as I will coach you to be really active on your social, this cobbler's child has no shoes on. So I'll tell you how to do it. I'm not as active as I should be. However, the website, we definitely respond, and we will reach out.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today and lending your insights around retail and the intersect between operations and leadership.
Thank you, Ange. It was a really fun time.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the whole person leadership cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.